Hello, Soul Tribe, and welcome back to David Berry 75's channel. I'm your guest reader, Toni, and if you'd like to guest read, please contact David via email or at Discord. And we're on Chapter 17, The Life and Power of the Stellar Man. If we had the opportunity to meet and speak to a stellar man, we probably would not find him appreciable different from any other man. There's nothing more laughable than the physical appearance that some mystics pretend to find in the great initiates. Looking at pictures of legendary masters such as Jesus, Kotumu, Moria, Serapis Bey, or others, some people expect to see extraordinary physical beauty as if the masters were angels incarnate. This shows exactly how people idealize these men whose physical appearance is in reality no different from any other man. The only thing which exposes them to the eyes of those who can see in the aura of strength and power which surrounds them, their brilliant eyes, their shining faces, and the harmonious vibration they project. This is an interesting description of the Rosicrucians by Henry Durville in his book History of the Secret Science, which demonstrates this point. In their era, the Rosicrucians were the most important Hermetic order, the seedbed of the stellar man. Nevertheless, true Rosicrucians do not easily reveal themselves, and those who identify themselves as such and endeavor to demonstrate so by touch or password are generally only vulgar imitators who have usurped the sacred name. There are Rosicrucians and Rosicrucians, and the initiates or students can only recognize the authentic members through internal and not external signs. Here are the comments by Durville on Rosicrucians. Their existence, although historically uncertain, is surrounded by the prestige that forces acceptance and wins admirations. They speak of mankind as infinitely beneath them. Their pride is great, although their exterior may be humble. They love poetry and declare that for them this is obligatory. Although they may possess great wealth, they keep themselves apart from human affection and do not submit to it except as a convenient obligation which is imposed by their living in the world. They are very courteous to women, although incapable of affection, and they consider women to be inferior beings. Externally, they are unaffected and differential, but the confidence in themselves which fills their heart is not radiated except before the infinity of the heavens. They are the sincerest people in the world, but granted, is soft in comparison with their impenetrability. Compared to these adepts, kings are poor. At their side, the wisest are stupid. They never take a step toward fame, which they despise, and if they should become famous, it is in spite of themselves. They seek no honors, as no human glory attracts them. Their great desire is to walk unrecognized through the world. Due to this, they are impassive in the face of mankind and responsive to whatever befalls them, self-impelled, self-enlightened by themselves in everything, but willing to do good as their strength permits. What measure can be applied to this immense exaltation? Critical concepts vanish before this. The state of these occult philosophies is the sublime or the absurd. Not being able to understand their souls or their objective, the whole world declares that one and the other are futile. Now, this portrait is far from being attractive or agreeable, but it shows the idea that Sapiens has of stellar men. Hermeticism, of which we speak in this book, sustains that the Hermetic initiate can acquire the following privileges along his or her path of initiation. 1. Freedom from complexes and base passions. 2. Freedom from the central computer of the sapiens, becoming a truly awakened man. 3. Absolute mental clarity and emotional equilibrium. 4. Knowledge of the occult forces of nature, the nature which is unknown. 5. Entrance into the elite of the truly wise. The true sage is a sage of the mind and not of the intellect. 6. Victory over the eventualities of life. 7. To know and to find oneself. 8. To grasp the secret of happiness and love. 9. Emotional, instinctive, and cerebral deprogramming. 10. Freedom from the collective unconscious or animal soul. 11. Union with one's inner divinity. 12. Knowledge of transcendental truth and only truth, becoming converted into a sage of the mind. 13. Freedom from futile pain and suffering. 14. Conscious reincarnation by means of an avatar. 15. Knowledge of the occult causes of all that exist. 16. Power over vibrations and secret of transmutations. 17. To achieve the status of stellar men or stellar women by means of genetic and psychological mutation. 18. Freedom from Maya. These powers place the Hermeticist on a higher level than the ordinary and common man. And for this reason, it is hard to really know a Hermetic master, even though we may be his close friend and he tells us most secret thoughts and feelings. From our position, it will be impossible to adequately interpret or evaluate these masters, and probably we will arrive at conclusions absolutely opposite to the truth. One must take into account the purely spiritual condition of the stellar man. All his higher faculties are of a spiritual nature and are the opposite of the worshippers or practitioners of astral magic, who need not have awakened, nor least of all become deprogrammed. In order to carry out their spells, it is necessary to issue a warning that a great percentage of those practicing magic fall completely into black magic, which can define in one of its aspects as the use and projection of the body's mass energy without having previously been deprogrammed. All sorcerers' apprentices are generally men who are asleep and programmed. These are people who, in their wonderic state, have had the opportunity, for whatever reason, to gain access to Hermetic theory. This theory is generally then used to satisfy their base passions or to live the agreeable friction of passing the extremely evolved and powerful beings. At times, behind these personages, there is the sincerity of one who deceives himself and lives in the illusions of a subjective world created especially for him. Black magic is usually not that which kills and destroys, but rather that which causes chaos and anarchy. Its worshippers are used by the beast from which they have not been freed, and they are used for its own dark designs. It is easy to understand that magical and spiritual are two absolutely different things, and one never reaches the spiritual by way of the magical. On the other hand, there is no individual who is truly spiritual who has no access to the magical. magic without spirituality is always black magic. To understand this, we must remember that spirituality does not mean adopting or spiritual attitude or purity, meekness, and love. It means, as we already stated, succeeding in having the spirit manifest through one's own brain. For this reason, we must necessarily consider parapsychology as the joining of phenomena involving the projection of energy, and which have absolutely nothing to do with spirituality. It is necessary to be spiritual to become, it is not necessary to be spiritual to become a medium or to have premonitions. On the contrary, these phenomena take place in the lower astral realm and are related to the animal and the passional part of the human being. Returning to the spiritual powers of the Hermeticist, we must state that his higher qualities do not let him escape or elude material reality. On the contrary, he must respect the laws of the all, and no one can go against the laws. For the moment he takes life in a material body, he must feed, sleep, rest, and entertain himself the same as any other person. He must suffer the same problems as the biological organism in a hostile environment. Books on pseudo-occultism have given the wrong impression because they depict the initiate as a fabulous being who needs no food or sleep and who spends most of his time on the astral plane. Spiritual perfection is confused with the material, forgetting that perfection in matter does not exist, since matter is subject to constant transformation. Nevertheless, the Hermetic initiate possesses the secret of transmutation and can, under certain circumstances, create or transform vital situations in order to alleviate problems which afflict him or to help other people with their difficulties. The stellar man is the possessor of truth. Many people are irritated with someone claims to possess absolute truth, deeming this an act of egocentrism and profound arrogance. Imagine for a moment that someone could actually have access to absolute truth. Should this man keep silent forever and hide his knowledge, or would it be his duty to help those who also desire to attain knowledge of truth? With full knowledge of truth, we affirm that the stellar man possesses absolute truth and that no one can reach the absolute without first being converted into a stellar man. Therefore, only stellar men know truth, absolute truth. This occurs not because a special person, human or divine, has revealed the truth to them, but because the special cerebral and intellectual form has attained through genetic and psychological mutation, have enabled them to become aware of the naked truth, which under the trance-like conditions in which sapiens live cannot be seen. It is necessary to understand that sapiens do not possess the organ of truth, but rather the organ of illusion and lies. Some great masters affirm that when man lived in paradise, he knew the truth, although he could not take advantage of this knowledge since he did not evolve. When God punished man by driving him out of Eden, he injected into him the organ of illusion so that he could reach the truth only by means of a titanic effort or of will and intelligence, and not by divine grace. This means that man can reach knowledge of truth and further evolve as he now has a physical body subject to transformation. Now, the fact that stellar man possesses absolute truth does not remotely mean he knows everything. In fact, he is aware of all that he does not know. but he has the fundamental science, which makes it possible to reach the knowledge of all he desires. If he dedicates sufficient time to their effort to possess absolute truth means to have risen above the universal plan, reaching union with the all who creates the sustains the universal illusion. The absolute is that which never changes and always remains identical in its intrinsic nature. Specifically, Hermetic truths do not change in themselves. It is only necessary to know how to apply them differently in situations which are always changing. There are 3 types of truth: absolute cosmic truth, knowledge of the mysteries of nature, knowledge of the 7 Hermetic principles. There's specific absolute truth, which is absolute truth relative to the specific problem or situation. And then there's relative truth in the illusory world, and a lie in relation to absolute truth. It is from this point of view of relative truth that the well-known aphorism arose and says that nothing is truth or a lie. It all is according to the color of the glass through which it is viewed. The stellar man is happy. His happiness, however, is not based on material things, although he makes use of all that nature offers. His happiness is based on the perfection, beauty, harmony, and stability of his internal world. The world is full of unhappy people who seek to satisfy their internal hunger, but do not know how to attain it. Each individual requires special food for his spirit, which is the only thing that will truly satisfy him. But generally, his ignorance leads him to seek one of the following paths. 1, those who constantly satisfy their beast without feeding the spirit. 2, the ascetics who renounce worldly pleasures, moved by internal convictions or impelled by their complexes. They devote themselves to a spiritual search but do not obtain the happiness yearned for. 3, those who try to maintain a balance between the above 2 points but who end up enslaved to the law of the pendulum, which forces them alternately from one path to another. The stellar man reaches a perfect internal equilibrium and equally satisfies his spirit and bestial hunger. He feeds his beast and his spirit, thus maintaining a perfect stability. His beast is not perverse, as mentioned in other chapters, but is a pure and natural beast. The stellar man is humble. He is perfectly aware of the enormous magnitude of his ignorance. When he compares himself with the immensity that surrounds him, he is awed by his own smallness. The stellar man loves all creatures. His consciousness is in everything, and everything is within him. The feeling of total unity makes him deeply aware of human nature. And when he learns the deepest motives of men, he finds it difficult to blame them for their mistakes. No one is capable of giving more love than he is, for loving is giving, and the stellar man is like a radiant sun, like a giant star. He manufactures energy in himself via the transformation of matter. This is an extension of the Hermetic concept of as above, so below. The stellar man is just the impartial. He possesses internal judgment, which enables him to always think impersonally, to judge without any personal bias and without considering his personal convenience. A true sage is always just. The stellar man lacks passion. All his instinctive, emotional, and intellectual manifestations are active. That is genuinely self-generated. He receives stimuli and makes use of them, but this does not oblige him to feel certain things or to become enslaved. He takes pleasure from what he enjoys. The stellar man is above death. If his physical body dies, the same does not happen to his spiritual individuality, which survives this destruction and takes possession of another physical body, either returning to the physical womb or taking charge of an already grown body. This permits him to consciously reincarnate, becoming an avatar. The stellar man constantly renews himself. Every so often, he modifies his standards of behavior to the point that someone observing him could state that he has no standards of behavior. He knows that mystery of the phoenix, which is reborn from its own ashes, and when time comes, kills itself. Then, being luminously reborn, this mysterious process occurs several times in the life of a stellar man within the same physical body. The stellar man is absolutely indifferent to the opinions of the others. He's not all that concerned about the image he projects. Furthermore, he knows that under certain circumstances, it is preferable to show a bad image, as there would be no possibility of being idolized. In this way, he comes to know who his most sincere friends really are. He is friendly, but only with those who possess internal substance. He will not tolerate superficiality, except if there are special qualities in a latent state. The stellar man is beyond good and evil. Therefore, his opinion of the events in the world and its people differ considerably from the usual ones. At times, he is very hard on those who have committed an error, which may appear insignificant, and on other occasions treats with kindness with those who, in our opinion, deserve the worst punishment. No one knows his reasons, but his attitude is certainly never the result of a whim. The stellar man lives in the world of causes, and by being in contact with the higher plane of causes, he himself places the causes he desires into motion in order to manifest concrete effects in his own life or the lives of others. The common man must wait for things to happen, for things he calls chance to favor him. When this does not happen, he must be resigned to live with the effects of causes he is completely unaware of. The stellar man is truly human. His spiritual powers do not make him shun life, and he generally complies with his civil duties and earns his living as does any other person. If he marries, he always tries to raise his companion to his level, but if that is not possible, if is able to live in peace, harmony, and love, the stellar man has no political ideologies. He is a humanist whose desire is for all human beings to attain spiritual evolution. Observe the difference between revolution and evolution. Revolution indicates rotation, a cyclical repetition. Everything changes, but with the passage of time, everything returns to what it was in the beginning. Evolution, on the other hand, means an ascending spiral, where a profound transformation that is not superficial takes place. The stellar man rejects all that impedes the individual's freedom, but does not condone the irresponsible use of freedom. He believes that the individual himself must deserve to be free and should not expect it as a gift from society or God. The stellar man may become ill and die like any other person, as his physical body is also subject to the law of material transformation. Nevertheless, if he so desires, in the majority of cases, he can transmute illness into health into a progressive and gradual manner. The greatest danger for him lies in the negative attitudes taken by other people he has helped at some time, and whose karma he has absorbed, as this provokes a real illness of mental origin, which is extremely difficult to cure. Recall that Jesus could not heal himself in spite of being the savior of mankind. The stellar man is not a hermit who keeps himself apart from the ups and downs of life. Far from being insensitive, he lives more intensely than most people. Nevertheless, he can choose to be harder than a rock or a diamond, or on the contrary, love with all his being. Emotionally speaking, he has exquisite sensitivity because his awareness encompasses a range of vibrations infinitely wider than that of the ordinary man. It is as if he could play a piano with an immense keyboard with thousands of different notes. The stellar man is introverted, but not selfishly so. His introversion is due to the extraordinary riches of his external world. His consciousness is so rich that it is painful for him to leave that veritable heaven to perform in this material world. This is especially painful for the master of Hermetic wisdom, or for one who has assumed the responsibility of transmitting knowledge. For every authentic master is, in a certain manner, crucified, symbolic of Christ. There is a Hermetic Rosicrucian axiom which says that if it is necessary to decrucify Christ, the superior I, to crucify the heart, emotional egotism. No one knows the sacrifice it entails for an individual who has reached heaven to descend once again into the dark world of mud. However, the action obeys the true wisdom of the polarity principle, for if the individual were to be permanently in heaven, he would eventually degenerate, as his virtue would encounter no obstacle. It is for this reason that the stellar man lives in heaven, but has his feet on the earth. As we have already stated, he is an inhabitant of two worlds. He lives simultaneously in heaven and on earth. He is human and divine. The stellar man knows the secret of the universal magnetism, and this permits him to vitalize himself and project his consciousness to his surrounding. Every highly developed Hermetic initiate has a tremendous magnetic irradiation which surrounds his body like a sphere of energy and is the extension of his mental power. The sphere of magnetic energy occupies a space and corresponds in size to the initiate's spiritual development. It is said that Jesus Christ possessed a powerful magnetic sphere that engulfed the entire earth, and that this had an enormous influence on the human race. The teachings make it possible to understand why God is everywhere, as his irradiation fills the entire universe. The stellar man practices the secret of the evolutionary circle. We have already referred to the circle of the ass, the long road walked by the human beast, who always remains in the same place. The circuit gives him no benefit of evolution. On the contrary, the evolutionary circle consists of the wise handling of the polarity principle, where the initiate oscillates between earth and heaven, alternately polarizing and depolarizing himself. In this way, a perfect equilibrium is maintained, achieving the wisdom of one who accustoms himself neither to the light nor darkness. His long journey always takes him to the starting point, but with considerable evolution. As an example of this, we'll cite the process so beautifully described by Hermann Hesse in Siddhartha, where the protagonist fights tirelessly for a long time in order to become separate from the human horde and attain his own individuality. But once he does this, he must suffer all kinds of trial and diverse experiences to finally search a union with the whole. But what a difference. What an infinite abyss separates the Siddhartha in the beginning from the sage at the end. Evolution has been completed. If we had to put this in a single aphorism, we would say that the sincerest desire of one who has fallen is to reach heaven, and naturally the strongest impulse of one who has reached heaven is to descend to earth. Again, we must meditate on the revolt of the angels of Anatole, France. The stellar man has his own morals. Celestial morals are different from the morals of terrestrial man. Celestial morals are absolute and invariable within the flexibility of the internal judgment, while terrestrial morals accommodate themselves to the customs of the dominant culture. If one day a cannibalistic culture should be dominant, cannibalism would be considered perfectly moral and correct, and furthermore, perhaps those who did not conform to it would be punished. When we state that the morals of the stellar men do not vary, we do not mean they are rigid. In spite of constant transformation, they remain intact in their essential nature. On the other hand, the Hermeticist considers many of the sapiens' attitudes as immoral. Irresponsibility, abuse of power, emotional blackmail, apathy, hypocrisy, blind conformism, self-pity, cerebral programming through the media, and glorification and applause are only a few of the immoral attitudes and customs of sapiens. Hermetic ethics are on an infinitely higher level than the accommodating rules of conduct of the common man. The power of the stellar man does not emanate from his third eye, nor from his chakras or the kundalini, nor does he possess parapsychological abilities. As we have already stated, Hermeticism maintains the parapsychological qualities, merely represents this displacement and projection of mass energy. Therefore, the more bestial the individual, the better chance of success he has. For this reason, parapsychological qualities work better with the individual when the individual is experiencing strong, instinctive, or emotional passionate states, which intensify or multiply the radiation of mass energy. There is no spiritual merit in this. It is only unconscious sorcery. The power of the Hermeticist emanates from a spiritual force, from purity, the domination of his passions, from the sublimation of his animal energy, and from the rectitude of his intentions. The stellar man may have great material problems in his earthly life, as his enormous difference in level from people make them instinctively look at him with a lack of confidence and fear upon perceiving a strange power they cannot classify. Persecution and common economic failure may turn into a serious obstacle for the Hermeticist, whose kingdom is not of this world and whose skills are not outstanding on this earth, where social and economic success are for those who possess a specific psychological makeup. Nevertheless, in spite of the fact that the Hermeticist can fail in some things, this experience will never oppress him, and if he strives sufficiently, he will always end up as a conqueror. The stellar man does good work, but is careful to whom. He helps to the limit of his strength, but only for those who, in his estimation, truly merit help. He believes that helping those who lack merit means to truly harm them. If the support offered is wasted and not fully utilized, he helps 2 or 3 more times, but then no more. the stellar man can be a difficult person to understand, or the most agreeable person in the world, as he is used to living in a world of lies, hypocrisy, cheating, and falseness. It is a shock to some individuals who are friendly with the stellar man that he is absolutely genuine, natural, and authentic without hiding corners or attitudes of any kind. His sincerity may be unbearable for those who hide beneath the countless mask of the personality. The following phrase explains the natural simplicity of the actions of the stellar man. When he eats, he eats. When he thinks, he thinks. When he speaks. And when he rests, he rests. He is not a perfect being and does not aspire to be one. As we have already explained, he endeavors to reach only relative perfection, as absolute perfection does not exist. However, after his mutation into a stellar man is accomplished, he has ended his ascension to Mount Olympus and is one more inhabitant of the sacred mountain, a semi-god who does not as yet desire absolute divinity. Nevertheless, his studies of the mystery of the universe never ceases, for they can never be completely known. It may be thought that this path is much too individualistic for an era which the world is moving faster each day towards collective structures. For those with this view, it needs to be pointed out that if a person does not first acquire his own individuality, he is really only an appendage of the masses. He's nothing more than one of the elements forming in a circuit, which in turn is part of the great machine. We understand that there are individuals who have personally failed and endeavored to fuse their undesirable I with that of the collective mass. But there is also an opportunity to emancipate, develop a superior I to reach complete fulfillment and maturity. To understand this, it is necessary to differentiate between an individual whose egotism leads him to blind individualism, or that is dangerous to society, and one who has become an individual and has a very clear sense of his duty toward mankind. Only one who has reached freedom can have a true collective consciousness, while at the same time retaining full freedom and autonomy without handing over his brain to any conqueror. What a difference there is between being incorporated into humankind because of an inability to be free and joining up with humanity after having attained freedom. It is interesting to consider that sapiens fear freedom, since this involves the only thing an animal within a flock cannot possess: intelligent individuality. For this same reason, sapiens endeavor to join movements which do not demand any thinking or decision making. Conversely, the hermetic path obliges the individual to take the responsibility of his life into his own hands instead of transferring it to the social group. From the philosophical point of view, one who has not first achieved his own individual existence can do nothing for the world and its people. One who is not has nothing to give. On the contrary, the Hermeticist has reached his complete individual stature. He is in condition to help others in the only truly efficient way, teaching them to live wisely. All right, and that is the end of chapter 17, the life and powers of the stellar man. And then next time you hear my voice, it'll be the last chapter, chapter 18, which is a general overview. All right, and I hope you guys have a favorable day and a beautiful one at that. And if you'd like to guest read, definitely contact David Berry at either on Discord or send him an email. And until next time, have a good one, you guys.